now my pleasure to invite the Rector of Emmanuel Church, the Reverend Pam Werntz, to address us this evening. As we know, we are such wonderful neighbors so that we live on top of each other.
Shabbat Shalom. Rabbi Shire, thank you for inviting me to speak this evening. I'm looking forward to your preaching at Emmanuel. I promise I'll get you the readings. I'm particularly aware that the last time I was with you all, it was the second night of Passover and the first counting of the Omer. And I was giving thanks for that evening because our calendar differences that sometimes separate Passover and the end of Holy Week were, in fact, a way that I could observe both. It's personally frustrating to want to be in two places at once, and it's nearly impossible for me to hold two emotional, spiritual states simultaneously when the joyful Passover celebration occurs in the somber 3 days before Easter. Because Passover and Easter were 7 days apart this year, that means our observances of Shavuot, also known as Pentecost, will be 7 days apart. So, Rabbi Shire, you'll be preaching at Emmanuel on the 49th day of counting the Omer, and Emmanuel will observe Pentecost on the following Sunday, June 8th, which will be the 50th day of our celebration of Easter. One of the things that our two congregations have in common is that many of our members, both the synagogue and the church, have come to spiritual community practice after some time away, or some for the first time. And so we have a desire to learn not just about other people's traditions, but our own religious traditions as well. In Judaism, Shavuot celebrates the giving of Torah and becoming a people committed to serving God. Shavuot is the birthday of Judaism. In Christianity, Pentecost celebrates the giving of a spirit of truth and becoming a people committed to serving God. Pentecost is the birthday of Christianity. We don't celebrate the same ways, but Jews and Christians celebrate the same festival as a birthday, and that is not a coincidence. The Christian feast of Pentecost and the Jewish feast of Shavuot celebrate the giving of a spirit of holiness and the giving of Torah. Those traditions, I think, develop side by side, informed by one another to become the annual celebration of people committing themselves to serving God in response to the ongoing gift of God's fundamental truth and of moral law. For Reformed Jews, Shavuot is a time for confirmation, following a season of anticipation. For Episcopalians, Pentecost is a time for confirmation, following a season of anticipation. Rather than one coming from the other, I think these traditions may have developed the way siblings or cousins develop, or twins separated at birth, each in their own way, in proximity with one another, with similar themes and meanings and characteristics and values. And we know from experience that individuals and communities, and indeed nations, always need to renew our commitments to ethical and moral service to the Holy One. I have loved learning about the practice of setting intentions and reflecting on aspects of spiritual well-being during the counting the Omer for 49 days, starting after the first day of Pesach, the celebration of freedom from slavery and oppression, and culminating the day before Shavuot, the celebration of receiving Torah, as a way to prepare for the commitment asked for on Shavuot. Since this evening is the 41st counting of the Omer, according to the values or virtues, the Midot Omer calendar by Rabbi Margaret Holub that Rabbi Shire sent to me, we are invited to contemplate the daily theme of Yesod, which means foundation or base, during the week of Yesod. In other words, tonight we are contemplating the foundation of foundation. In practical terms, I understand it that attending to Yesod inspires us to align our thoughts and our emotions and our actions in a coherent way, creating a solid foundation for our lives and our communities. Yesod can be seen as the integrity of our relationships, our ability to follow through on our commitments, and the way we express and enact our values in our daily lives. Yesod teaches us the importance of grounding spiritual insights and principles in our actions. Yesod reminds us that without a strong foundation, even the most noble ideals are wobbly, unstable, and short-lived. I want to invite you to think for a moment about the values that are most important to you. What 4 or 5 values are foundational to who you are? I'm going to give you a minute to make a list. I hope you could think of several values that are foundational to who you are. And I wonder if the people who know you best would be able to guess the values that are on your list. What about the people with whom you work or study or pray? Could they guess what your grounding values or organizing principles are? And finally, what about people with whom you have just brief interactions or encounters, running errands or taking transportation? Would they be able to imagine what you value based on how you comport yourself? If you're like me, some days are better than others. Perhaps Yesod of Yesod is what Christian theologian Paul Tillich termed the ground of being, the divine. Thinking about the foundation of foundation that way reminds me of a poem by Shaylin Harkin in her book of poetry called Susceptible to Light. I want to share it with you. She writes about church, but I think her words could apply to other houses of worship as well. Harkin says, "The worst thing we ever did was to put God in the sky out of reach, pulling the divinity from the leaf, sifting out the holy from our bones, insisting God isn't bursting dazzlement through everything we've made, a hard commitment to see as ordinary, stripping the sacred from everywhere, to put in a cloud man elsewhere, prying closeness from our hearts. The worst thing we ever did was to take the dance and the song out of prayer, make it sit up straight and cross its legs, removed it of rejoicing, wiped it clean from its hip sway, its questions, its ecstatic yowl, its tears. The worst thing we ever did is pretend God isn't the easiest thing in this universe available to every soul in every breath. A revised Harkin's ending to the reflection without permission. But I want to suggest that the best thing we ever do is behave as if God is the easiest thing in this universe available to every soul and every breath. I think most of you know that the two signs on our doors describing Central Reformed Temple and Emmanuel Church literally stop traffic every day. People stand and stare and smile and take pictures because they can't believe it. And while I often struggle with wanting to be in two places at once, or struggle to hold joy and sorrow at the same time, this building, these two communities, this foundation of foundation has the capacity to hold both our congregations with integrity, united upon the ground of being. Together, we are modeling that the foundation of foundations looks like when we behave as if the God of love is indeed available to every soul in every breath. May it be so.